Good morning and welcome to Morning Java, brought to you as always by Get Go Cafe and Market. Where right now, Dale, the hoagies, they're back and they're not 6 inches, they're 7 inches.
Full 7-inch subs, has more meat, more cheese on it than, well, a 6-inch sub.
And that, yeah, gotta love that. Meat and cheese goes right with me.
This man over here is going to spend an awful lot of his spring training writing about the fifth starter battle. Even though fifth starter battles, never mean anything, do they?
Not really. I remember one year, Pete Shorey and Jimmy Anderson were competing for the fifth spot.
He just dropped a Jimmy on you all.
And I remember standing there the last day of camp. They'd yet to decide who it would be. I'm thinking, here we are, the beat guys. We've been here all spring. We have no lives, and we're obsessing over who's going to be the fifth starter. I'm thinking 99.9% of the world could care less who the Pirates'
It doesn't
fifth
even
starter
know
is.
that the Pirates are looking for a fifth starter. But when you're down here and you're in this every day,
You
it
lose
feels
perspective.
so big. And then here comes the moment where the manager's about to tell you the fifth starter, and you're like, wow, this is enormous. And then Pete Shurek ends up the opening day starter, but that's another story entirely. Where the Pirates' fifth starter battle is concerned, I mean, there's a lot of different guys in the mix, but it might not matter anyway, will it, John? Because you look at their April schedule, they have 3 off days in the first 18 days.
They do, and then they have two in the fourth week of the season, so they probably only need a fifth starter in April. It maybe, and this is the maximum, 3 times, maybe even 2. So, and I think it really doesn't matter that much, even if it's Jordan Lyles or Nick Kingham or Stephen Brault or whoever. They're still going to be working out of the bullpen quite a bit in the first month.
It won't be Kingham. It just won't. No chance. Brault's getting this job, isn't he?
I think that's who they would like. They would like to have a lefty in the rotation, but I think they also feel they need to give Jordan Lyles a legitimate shot because that was part of their selling point to sign him, and I don't think they want to do the bait and switch so quick and say, oh, I know he said you were going to start, but nah, that's
kidding.
not going to happen. Yeah.
All right, Hunter, let's talk about something that most people don't really talk about. Let's talk about Steelers who have fallen out of the good graces of not just fandom, but just the public in general. People that, we're not going to talk about obvious guys that did crazy things like Ernie Holmes back in the day with shooting helicopters. We're talking about guys that were beloved or at least liked among Steelers Nation and are now out of the mix. Let's take the obvious one of James Harrison off the table. We know that that's happening. Antonio Brown might happen at some point. Let's think back. Give me a name off of your head that you can think of a guy that fits into that vein.
I'll tell you a guy who I feel like fits the vein. It was never as high profile as Harrison or AB in this case, but Mike Mitchell. Everybody hated Mike Mitchell. And you know what, man? I'm going to say it. I don't hate Mike Mitchell. I never did. I covered MMA before this, and they invited a bunch of Steelers to the UFC card when they were in Pittsburgh. And Mike Mitchell was one of the guys who showed up for the UFC open workouts and everything. I got to talk to him and hang around him. Just seemed like an awesome guy. He was genuinely excited about fights, first of all, which was cool to me. But then he was just cool to talk to, cool to be around. And as a player, was he that bad? Did we ever think he was Troy Polamalu or Ed Reed? I mean, that was never the expectation. No. So I don't understand why he got so much heat, man. You got the more analytical football mind. What's your take on Mike Mitchell?
My thinking on Mike Mitchell, one, he's a traditional hard-hitting free safety in a role that's sort of becoming more outdated as the NFL continues. And he's not as much of the guy that Ryan Clark could be in his day. They brought him in to be a Ryan Clark, Chris Hope type, and he's a little bit slower, wasn't as good, but he was a very good communicator, and that's one thing that I really liked about Mike Mitchell. My first interaction, I'll tell you a story with Mike Mitchell, was after the Bears loss of 2017, and I was trying to get DK was telling me hey, go get him real quick. And I walked up to him, and he was not answering questions, and he was just like, "I'm not answering questions." I said, Mike, that's cool, but do you? I said I'm done answering questions. I was like, okay, Mike, you got it. And we had several good conversations after that, but he was just not having it after that. And I think that's something that people saw is that he wanted to be the villain, and he just wasn't the villain to too many teams. I mean, he made a big play here or there, and he had a couple plays, but when you think of his 2 or 3 year stretch with the Steelers, there weren't enough plays that stood out to say Joey Porter. Joey Porter could be the villain any day of the week. As a coach, he was a villain. But, when it came to Mike Mitchell, he just didn't fit that role. And I think that ticked off a lot of people because he was proud and he was excited to be who he was. but he didn't live up to that hype. I'll give you my guy that I think of. It's Greg Lloyd. Greg Lloyd used to be, I mean, as a kid, that was one of the first guys that I identified as a tough football player. You know, he's just, they don't pay me for my disposition, you know, like that kind of stuff. But I mean, you saw after his career, Greg Lloyd just more of the craziness that was in Greg Lloyd sort of came out. He put a gun in his kid's mouth at one point. You know, because I think he had bad grades or something. That's a guy that Steelers fandom is just like, okay, yeah, we recognize that you weren't just, that wasn't an act. That wasn't you trying to get a bad boy rep. You literally were this crazy. So there's people like Mike Mitchell, Greg Lloyd, James Harris we could talk about. But you viewer, get in the comments section. Who's your person that you can think of that's fallen out of graces that you're just not with anymore?
Yeah, and if you burnt a jersey or something crazy like that, definitely let us know about that.
All right, Hunter, let's do a Steelers topic here. Let's talk about an unsung player that is highly beloved within the Steelers nation. Give me your guy that people never think about or don't think about enough when it comes to the Steelers.
Yeah, I may come up with a different name if I think about this long, but just as you say, the guy who comes to mind is Herb Waters.
Who's that?
Exactly. You get a practice squad corner, and he comes in, and the Steelers start going on a crazy winning streak. This is the past season. What? So I don't know if you guys use Reddit at all, but I'm on the Steelers subreddit.
I'm still getting hip to it.
Yeah, I'm on the Steelers subreddit a lot, the NFL subreddit. And when we signed Herb and they started winning, Herb became, it was a meme for the most part, but I'm not convinced
sort of
it was
like the
totally
Shaggy meme.
Exactly.
I got you.
I'm not convinced that it was exactly a meme. I think there may have been some magic in those waters, you know. So that was the guy this year that I always laughed at, because there were like people making custom jerseys because like they didn't sell his jersey, obviously. So they would do a custom, you know, 35 waters or whatever.
Insane.
So I like that, man. But who you got for me? I feel like you got somebody queued up.
You just said the number.
Oh.
Number 35. Who am I thinking of? It's number 35.
Dan Kreider.
That's the man right there. That is the dude.
Man.
That guy never got enough love in this city. And I know that people like love Dan Kreider, but you should have loved Dan Kreider. That guy defined hard-hitting fullback. Say it twice. Fullback. He would bring it every single time. His rookie season, 2000, the year of the Ravens' mystical defense, one-on-one, Ray Lewis in the gap, just boom, flatten him, pancake. That's when I said, I wanted to block somebody. My dad still remembers, he's like, you got really excited when that happened. And I'm like, well, there's this guy, Ray Lewis, that's supposed to be the baddest in the NFL, and this rookie fullback just took him out. And he was every bit as important as those early 2000s runs in 2005. And I really thought they should have fought to keep him for going into the 2008 run. Of course, they didn't need him for that year. But Dan Kreider was such a good, and coming off of, the Steelers had a good fullback in Tim Lester, the original bus driver, the guy that led Jerome Bettis around. But Dan Kreider really was a huge role player in the Steelers offense for years, and really helped, to me, he helped define that cower power sort of football that was around. A guy that I certainly miss seeing, because I even on football, just around like, man, the days of Mike Allstott and seeing it around the league, but I miss seeing more Dan Kreiders play in NFL football.
Well, I feel like the Steelers got a pretty solid fullback right now.
No.
Could he be?
Rosie Nixon's a bad guy.
What I'm transitioning to here, could he be Dan Kreider? Does he got that kind of power, and is he Kreider quality?
I think he's of the same cloth, but he's not as consistent as Dan Kreider. And it also could not be fair to Rosie, because this is a passing era. We're talking about, the Steelers are in the spread all the time. Back then, man, pro split, line up your fullback and your running back, and we're coming first and second down. That's just a different balance. But Rosie of the same ilk, but just you still got to give it to Danny Kreider.